Bets, presented by Prize Picks here on the Mayo Media Network. I am Matt Moody, joined as always by my buddy DJ Mitchell, talking about Tuesday's NHL hockey. DJ, how you doing? How have the playoffs been to you so far?
They've been really good. You can call me not Edmonton because I've been enjoying them. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Every game, a lot going on. I mean, there's so much to cover since we last recorded this. I haven't worth trying to go over everything. Obviously, we haven't even talked since the Tavares news or anything like that. So a lot of just craziness. We'll get to as much as we can. Even more stuff happens on Monday night leading into this Tuesday. Much smaller slate, 2 games. But Matt, how have the playoffs been to you? Any big updates?
No, I mean it's been great hockey. I've had some close calls and a lot of decent lineups. Nothing too special yet. Monday was an awesome slate. I mean, 5 games, action packed. The studs showed up. And Tuesday, unfortunately, we only have 2 games. We lost a couple teams, so so long to St. Louis and to Washington as Colorado and Boston advance to the next round. But that does leave us with Toronto and Montreal, and then Nashville and Carolina on Tuesday, which also means we'll be right back here on Thursday as well to talk about these 2 matchups because they're guaranteed to happen on both Tuesday and Thursday. So just a nice easy couple of 2-game slates to get into. But before we do that, I do want to talk about Prize Picks. If you're a longtime listener of this show, of course you know what Prize Picks is. But if you're new, check them out at prizepicks.com and use promo code MMN when you sign up. They'll give you up to $100 after you deposit. So it's a real good way to sort of show your support for this show and also to get a great product. So what you do over there is you open up their platform. It's very easy. You see the board. The board has all the players across multiple leagues, not just hockey. There's basketball, baseball, esports, golf, things like that. You can mix and match across all the sports. And once that is done, you look at the fantasy scores tied to each player, and all you do is you pick the over or the under. So in hockey, you're looking at 3 points for a goal, 2 points for an assist, and a half point for a block and a shot on goal, meaning you're looking for shooters. So if you think guys are going to shoot the puck a lot on, say, Tuesday, go after those guys. So that's just sort of the baseline entry into the NHL, but do feel free to check out all the other sports too. It's a lot of fun. Highly recommend you check it out. And once again, use promo code MMN when you sign up over at prizepicks.com. So, DJ, we have 2 games. Let's start with Toronto at Montreal. Coming off a back-to-back, one, how do you think that affects things here? Obviously, we're seeing Edmonton and Winnipeg playing on a back-to-back. And secondly, is there anything that we need to take note of coming into this Tuesday night matchup?
Yeah, I think, to answer your first question, I don't try to let it get too deep into my thought process, especially on a 2-game slate. I really think in the playoffs, if you're playing a 2-game slate, you might want to lean a little bit heavier towards one side and hope in GPP that goes to overtime. This game, I'm not going to say this is a standoff game for me, but I'm definitely going to get the pieces of the good Toronto players. Matthews will be a stone cold lock in my lineups. And then the one note that I noticed on a good level is that, Nylander actually did bump up to the first power play, the 3rd period. I'm not sure if that's going to stick, but I mean, that first unit looked abysmal for Toronto. They move him up. It looked a lot better. So I'm willing to consider putting him in my core. He's 5,600. I'm also really considering him as a score prop. He's just been awesome. He did score on Monday night. I definitely see it happening again. He's been pretty consistently shooting. On the Montreal side, we did get some bad news that Terry Lehkonen did get hurt. I don't imagine he'll be back, but we don't really know the severity of the injury yet. Their coach already said that Carey Price is back in net for tomorrow. As expected, he looked great. So I don't know. What are your overall thoughts? I mean, I'm definitely afraid to go over. So I think
Yeah, no, I mean, Meany had the perfect read on this game, Toronto in the under. So, I honestly feel like we can go right back to that. It seems pretty straightforward to me. It is interesting, usually Artturi Lehkonen being injured doesn't really impact much. However, they sort of seem to try and recalibrate their lines just to shut down Matthews. So meaning they put Danault and Lehkonen together basically to form, 2/3 of a shutdown line. Obviously that means that there's a lot of ice time that, Lehkonen was slotted to see on Monday night that he didn't wind up getting. So I'm not quite sure where that leads me to in terms of like which player fills the void. Eric Stahl is dealing with a minor injury. We could see him draw back in. We just don't know until pregame warmups over there. But I think a lot of these signs are just pointing to, even with Cole Caulfield, Montreal's just not scoring. So Toronto at minus 175, I feel like that's a real solid option. And if I had to pick between, Toronto and Carolina as big favorites, I'm going with the Toronto side myself. So any other thoughts? I mean, obviously you can bet Matthews to score. I think he's, probably the one player I would do that for. Otherwise, I kind of feel like I'm off this game. And, as you're alluding to, do you have anything else here? Because I can segue us right on into the next matchup.
I mean, I guess the only way I'd look at this is if you are trying to get contrarian and you're trying to take pieces of Montreal, it's really easy to correlate them. And I think you're going to want to go through one of their defensemen and hope that they end up kind of breaking the slate. Petrie looked real good. That'd be the one guy that I might highlight, but I just can't imagine paying it on DraftKings. But I do think that there is some sort of narrative to, the Canadians getting a win. If you're going to do that, play price. I could see like if you make enough lineups where you could talk me into that. But other than that, I think that, their odds of getting more than 25 shots, 30 shots on net is pretty low. So I like kind of everything you said already. And I think we'll see a similar result to Monday night.
Yeah, I guess just a couple other guys on the Montreal side. Josh Anderson was the guys playing next to Dano. Obviously, things got shifted around a bit with Lehkonen going out, but that's a guy who is a regular rate shooter. All the time he just puts up numbers. When he's on the ice. So if he's getting the role, he's getting the power play time. So I think Josh Anderson's like the one piece I'm looking for on the Montreal side. But I just wanted to sort of, before we get to the next game, I did want to circle back on your idea of game stacking. And I mean, the perfect, the perfect scenario happened in games 3 and 4 for Carolina and Nashville, where both of these games went deep into overtime, both even hit double overtime. And it just sort of means that, obviously in a general sense, your goalies and your skaters from the other team are, negatively correlated. Like if your skaters score like you want them to, your goalie's getting scored on, which you don't want. However, when one game is, say, 50% longer than the other game, there's just that much more time for stats to accrue. So I do think a great way to sort of leverage this slate from a daily fantasy perspective is to do a bunch of game stacks of sort. And so on this Nashville Carolina side, I mean, we saw that play out to perfection. So I'm seeing Nashville plus 160. Obviously, they won 2 home games. Both those games were in deep overtime. So it's not like they were, the better team in either matchup, but they won and they have UC Saros. So I'm sort of thinking about this Carolina Nashville matchup as more of the tight game. But do you disagree with me when I say that maybe I could get behind the Nashville money line here?
I mean, we've talked about this before, but at least we talked about it separately from the podcast. It feels like Nashville is trying their best to like limit the upside for some reason, and it's just working nonetheless. Like their power plays are very odd, not what I'd expect at all. And I just keep thinking like, man, this Nashville team seems to be shooting themselves in the foot, yet they're winning. So I'm very baffled by what Nashville is doing and seeing results. I mean, obviously Saros has been an absolute gold mine for them and keeping them in these games. And I think that more than anything, I might just play Saros because I think even if it doesn't go to overtime, he could see the 35 save bonus.
Yeah.
Rather than talking myself into, I think a really low upside play in Campbell. I think the Delkovich is just a supreme play there as well. So I'm not sure if I'm willing to convince myself that I could actually put like real hard-earned American dollars or loonies or toonies if you're in Canada on Nashville personally. But I do think that the odds are a little bit weird. Maybe not quite giving Nashville enough respect. I agree with that, but I couldn't do it myself.
Yeah. I just sort of feel like, you're saying hard-earned dollars. Well, if you take the easy money, that's the Toronto side, there you go, parlay it up. That feels a bit like easy money to me rather than hard earned money. But anyway, I'm almost looking at the Nashville puck line, and I know it's pretty juiced up, minus 177 for it. But if you're asking me to parlay either, Nashville, basically parlay something of the team sides with the Toronto money line, I actually would probably go with that, minus 177 on the Nashville front rather than the minus 186 that Carolina wins in any fashion. Because I'm not entirely convinced that this Carolina team will score like we thought they would. I mean, they had one of the league's best power plays all year. It's been fine, but it hasn't looked as electric. And maybe they do something to change that. But maybe like say Marty Nachos or something like that. But I'm sort of in on this general talent that Nashville has. Like, I'm just going to say it. Matt Duchene looks good. Playing with Philip Forsberg. I think if I'm looking to one player in this game, it's Forsberg. I don't quite trust the Aho. I think he's my favorite guy in Carolina, but they're just so spread out that I want to be in on Forsberg, hit shot prop, and even to score at plus 188 seems pretty long to me. So I think Forsberg's a guy to build around in this matchup. But give me a couple players you like, maybe on the Carolina side.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super duper easy to say the Fab Five from them, if you will. The first power play is just so incredibly easy. So I think I'll step back from that. Two guys that maybe are a little bit under the radar, especially because if you're playing this late, especially on DraftKings or something, and you want to get Austin Matthews and you want to get Dougie Hamilton and those guys in your lineup, you're going to have to find saving somewhere. I think the number one guy that I'm considering, and maybe I'll talk myself out of it, but a guy like Jesper Fast is minimum salary playing on the second power play right now. He's not an incredible great rate shooter, but he also does block pucks. So I think that he could help fit a lineup together as a really cheap option. Other than that, these Carolina defenders, if they don't get Jake Slavin back, Bean had 27 minutes, obviously going to double overtime game. He's going to get way more. Brady Shea didn't see power play run, but he had almost 40 minutes. And then Pesci's been, I think, a pretty high-owned guy since Slavin's gone down. He's, 4,300 now. All these guys are really, really cheap. Bean, I would say, has a bit more seemingly offensive pedigree, and he does play the second power play, but hasn't really seen the shots. Brady Shea, we've seen flashes, and he did hit the shot and block bonus last game out. So I think he's more of your safer bet, maybe not quite the upside. And then Pesci will probably be a bit over-owned in my opinion, but definitely could see the blocks bonus easily.
Yeah, so one guy that, you mentioned a few, but I actually don't think you mentioned my favorite punt from this game, which is Yanni Hakanpää. Okay. Especially if Slavin's out. I mean, obviously overtime helps this, but he's shooting a ton. I actually was digging into some of his like HockeyViz numbers. You click on the player on hockeyviz.com and you can sort of like search for him and see like his different rates and stuff. He's one of the most active defensemen in the league in terms of taking pucks and putting them on goal. You just don't know it because he doesn't play much. He doesn't get a ton of ice time or whatever. But when he's out there, he's making it count. And just last game, he picked up the double bonus, obviously helped by overtime and all that. But it's like 8% more likely than the average defenseman. A guy like Brent Burns is up in like the 10 to 12 range. So it's not like he's like Brent Burns or anything. He doesn't have the role. But I want guys who, get the puck on their stick and just want to fire it at the net, especially in a series like this where something crazy could happen. Like, yeah, he could hit the bonus, but he could also just score a fluke goal. He get a random assist. Things like that certainly do feel like they will happen on both sides in this game here. So how do you feel about the over-under here? Because to me, this feels like a 3-3 game going into overtime. Yeah. I don't know how it gets there because, just the series kind of feels gross, but it does just feel like one of those games where like the over is going to hit and it's going to end. You're just going to be like, how did that happen? So that's sort of my lean, on the sides. But yeah, I will be building a lot around Forsberg, around Aho and Hamilton and, all the dudes, and then using a couple punts to make it work, right. Like Hakanpää. So
I could see the overhitting. I think I like it just slightly. I think that there's a couple really, really cheap stacks in this game, as we already kind of alluded to a couple of Carolina. On the Nashville side, the the power plays have been weird. Like I said, there's a few different angles you could take. One is Carrier on defense was playing on, I think I want to say second power play. I don't really know. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
But he's with the OC, but he's also not with Forsberg. So it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
The first unit, like I'm saying, then if I'm going to go that way, would be Cousins, who scored, Ekholm, Forsberg, Haula, and Youngcroc. Youngcroc and Cousins both correlate and are incredibly, incredibly cheap. So that would be a minimum salary Cousins, who correct me if I'm wrong, is a bit more of a net front guy. And then Youngcroc, right, who has some good rate shots. So those two could definitely hook up for a goal, which they didn't hook up for a goal together on that power play, but they were out there together. So, I could see like that kind of a cheap stack working. And they also get a lot of 5-on-5 run and Youngcroc on the penalty kill. So that's one angle to look at. Haula also completes that unit. I didn't even say his name, but he completes the power play and that line. So that's like one really cheap stack that, maybe not the most upside in the world, but if you're playing Matthews, Marner, you're going to have to find it somewhere.
Yeah. Sort of for me, it's something I say a lot, but like the triangle on the power play seems like it's going to be Yarncroc, Forsberg, and Ekholm. So those would be the three guys that if I'm stacking up, Nashville, that's where I'm looking, just because, they'll go boom, 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 boom. Those three guys pass into each other. Maybe another guy chips in. But typically those will be the guys getting the most touches, and that's where I like to focus my DFS builds. So we're looking at each of these games. DJ, do you have one bet from each game that you just sort of, feel best about? And then just let's talk like real quick about what you're doing in terms of goalie, which I think we already discussed, but bet first.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the easiest way to go about any of this is to take either Aho or Svechnikov and decide, take some time and say, which one of these shot overs do I like more? Because they have both been absolutely ripping it both together. They're one of my favorite stacks of the night. OT has helped them get there, but back-to-back games for Svechnikov with 6 shots on goal. Aho, back-to-back games with a total of 11 shots on goal. Dougie Hamilton, 14 shots on goal. These three guys have all smashed. I didn't even say Hamilton at first. So any of them, I think, take a little time, do a little research of your own, but they're all really good bets in that game. And then the other game, I think just take Toronto. Don't even get difficult with it. And if you don't want to do that, you want to get a little bit more out there, it's just Marner and Matthews. I know they've been a little bit slow. It's not the best last game. They didn't get did either of them get a point?
Marner did. Yeah.
Marner did. Yep. But they both combined for a goal.
Yeah, so
still really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm doing is so obviously Matthews, I like him, shots and, goal. But Nylander, I think, offers actually better value because we sort of know what, like we saw, like you said, that they played their hand. Nylander moved up to that first power play unit. So let's just take advantage of that news because I don't think he's priced like it. And then the other game, I like Forsberg, the shots and the goal prop on him too. So those are my two guys that I'll be sort of building around. And obviously DFS, just stack up. We mentioned game stacks and all that. But who do you think your highest goalie will be? Will that be UC Saros? Or do you think that maybe the pace in Toronto, Montreal kicks up a bit because it just hasn't really seemed to be there through 3 games?
I'm not buying it. I think that I'm going to go with one of the cheaper goalies in either Price or Saros. And I could really talk myself into Carey Price, especially if I game stack that second game, because I think that there's a decent chance he could get there with just shots on goal alone. But if he does a Carey Price game and gets them a win, I mean, you could really, really set yourself apart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where I'm looking right now. Because I think Saros will be higher owned than Price. I mean, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I definitely.
And you could definitely play Matthews against him. Don't even think twice. Don't think you can't do that because Matthews could go for 8 shots, 2 blocks, a goal, and be an absolute must-have. So talk yourself out of playing him.
Yep, absolutely.
Matthews is locked in my lineups.
Yeah, and I think that's really all we can ask for on 2 game slates. Just sort of mention a few things. But DFS should be fun. It should be interesting. Definitely don't be afraid to get wacky with your correlations and stuff. And for betting, it's relatively straightforward. You can't parlay too many things together. So it's going to be a lot of straight bets and all that. And as always, if you have questions or whatever, you can reach out to us on Twitter. I am at Fake Moods. DJ's at DJ_Mitchell94. Or you can just reach out to the Mayo Media Network at Mayo Media Net. Someone will get back to you. We're always on Twitter. So that's the best place to reach us. But we'd love if you guys also left reviews, left comments in the videos if you're watching still, because, the playoffs are a grind for all of us. So let us know you're out there, that you're still enjoying this, because, boy, it's been a lot of fun as well as a grind. So, DJ, anything before we get out of here?
No, just enjoy the rest of the playoffs. If you have a team still going, enjoy that. If you're a Sabres fan, I'm sorry. We'll get back there maybe next decade, maybe 2030.
Maybe next decade.
Yeah.
All right. It is kind of, I'm wearing a Rochester Reapers hat, just the general beautiful geographical area.
Going on Thursday.
All right, guys. Good luck on this Tuesday slate. Thanks as always to Prize Picks, and we will see you.